Hey there, I'm Stef.
And I'm Simon.
And welcome to The Food Fight, where we offer a different perspective on food culture issues around Australia and the world.
We'll talk with chefs, producers, business owners and experts to hear their stories and find out what makes them tick.
This week has been a huge one in the wage theft saga, with Dinner By Heston closing its doors and George Calombaris MADE Establishments going into voluntary administration. Let's go. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the new podcast, The Food Fight, hosted by myself, Stef Postuma, and him, Simon Evans.
Hey, how's it going?
Wow, so enthusiastic for our first episode, Simon.
Always.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, nervous. It's all new.
Nervous, holding a real microphone.
Yeah, exactly. It's
real
weird.
recording equipment.
We're sitting across from each other as well.
Yeah.
Not like kind of stage sitting.
Yeah.
Like used to be like
it's good.
the Last Supper when we had a few guests on.
Gaze into each other's eyes. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. We'd like to acknowledge the Wadi Wadi people of the Dharawal Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land of the Illawarra, and pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So we are revamping the Gong Show podcast. It's just me and Simon these days. Our friend Andy Burns is working on his number of businesses. He's a busy man, but we'd love to have him as a guest eventually. But I guess, Simon, let's start with talking a bit about what we're going to be doing with the Food Fight. I guess when we started the Gong Show with Andy, it was always a bit of a place to talk a bit of shit and a bit of banter. And I mean, we started off, doing things like tasting tins of wine and,
The fun days.
Yeah, exactly. And it was always kind of just supposed to be what's going on around Wollongong. But it sort of grew into something where we started talking about, topics and food culture issues and things like that. And we decided we enjoyed that. So we pursued that. But with three of us all being co-hosts of it, you obviously owning a business, Andy owning a business, myself owning a business and doing other things like radio and writing and all sorts of fun stuff, it was really hard to get us all in a room together and do it consistently.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge towards the end, was trying to actually get a date to do things. We had a big list of things we want to talk about, but trying to get three people, a bit logistically hard to do that, especially with everything going on with owning a business. So bit of a hiatus, bit of a break.
Yeah. And there's
last one did 6 months ago?
Yeah, probably something like that. The last episode of the Gong Show.
Recharged.
We're refreshed and recharged. And there's a lot that's happened during that time. But I guess one of the things that Simon and I are going to be doing with this new podcast is hopefully we're going to be traveling a bit with it. So we are not far at all from Sydney here. We've already had some contact with potential guests up in Sydney who would like to get on the show, planning trips like things down the coast to Canberra, places where I'm connected through publications that I've done in the past. Also, we've had some contact with people down in Melbourne, and it's just a bit easier for us to sort of get around and to do these podcasts more frequently. And so we've got some ideas and we've got some plans. We don't want to just be doing things where we talk about issues in food and hospitality and stuff like that. We want to be doing a few fun things as well, some little small segments, whatever it may be. And we're open to obviously the suggestions from the audience as well. So stick with us. Audience,
just two battlers.
Yeah, that's it.
Just two battlers back in the day, doing a podcast.
But yeah, stick with us. We've got this is our first episode where we're just going to give a bit of an introduction, talk about some things, and then we're going to get straight into some guests and stuff with the up and coming episodes. So there's plenty to look forward to. We've already been in contact with some people. We had a chat about why we were going to name it The Food Fight, and other than being a catchy name, I guess it sort of works for a number of reasons.
Yeah, the Gong Show was only really ever a placeholder for one.
Yeah.
Whilst we thought of a better name, but then we kind of stuck with it, and it was supposed to be a bit more gong heavy as a show. But then trying to find something that kind of fitted what we want to do. Like, we're not all hospitality; it's kind of more slightly wider subjects. So after lots of texting back and forth, the Food Fight kind of summed up what we're doing, fighting for food, and the food fight, and also this podcast can be just a bit of a shit fight as well sometimes.
Exactly.
So it kind of it worked out, and I think it trying to name something's hard.
Definitely.
Like I'm also glad I've never had to name a restaurant.
Yeah.
It would just be extremely difficult to find something that you think's right when you think about it so much.
I guess the other, like, I guess what we hope to do with this show as well is offer a perspective on food issues that you might not find in general food media, because I feel like a lot of the food media that people consume comes out of large institutions in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time those institutions have deep-rooted connections to the hospitality community in those places. And they do feed one another in a way, in terms of, high-profile chefs being newsworthy people, and those high-profile chefs relying on news media, on food media for publicity and to stay in the loop. So it's a bit of a self-feeding organism in that sense.
Very, very polished in a lot of ways, and you hear the same fucking bullshit from everyone, and it's always their PR story and their little this, that, and the other. I think a lot of people writing about who kind of the writers and journalists in food media haven't worked that much in hospitality because they're writers. So maybe from them they just don't have the kind of inside track, or wouldn't be able to ask a chef a particularly kind of pointed question that's quite specific, and I think we can get to the nitty gritty a little bit better like that. Yeah, hopefully. And I guess being here in Wollongong makes us sit outside of those larger hubs, and we definitely will have a lot of bias in some of the things that we say. There's no hiding that. And I think that when it comes to things like small business and regional food, both of us will be completely biased in the way we approach that sort of thing, but we're not going to make any apologies for that. Yeah, I guess one of the benefits is that having that bias, having that connection allows us to come from a different perspective. But at the same time, underdogs, I like to think of it.
That's it. At the same time, we're so passionate. Like, we're both so passionate about food and hospitality, and we want the hospitality industry to win. Or in general, you know what I mean. We want everyone to be successful. You don't want anyone who, like, doesn't matter who you are. Like, we don't want anyone to not be successful and not prosper in this industry. But there's also some shit that we'll call out, we'd
happily call out.
Exactly. So I think that's one of the reasons why we'll sort of call it the food fight, and we'll see what happens. Gloves are on.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess what I wanted to start with, Simon, was let's talk a little bit about what both of us have been up to for the last 6 months, because one of the reasons why we didn't start this earlier was that you bought a new business.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing. I think the fact that we couldn't think of a name for the new podcast,
that's true.
That took about 6 months.
6 months of texting one another randomly.
Probably kept me busier than buying a new business.
Priorities.
Obviously, it kind of happened where we were having a little break when Andy left. At the same time, Andy opened our debts as well. And then shortly after, Tom and I, a business partner from Vote, bought Night Parrot on Crown Street. Which was fun, a complete shit fight over
Wine
Christmas.
Bar. Yeah, and you bought that in what? When did you settle that?
I think it was end of October. It could be November. I can't remember. It's like,
so coming into the thick of the year.
Yeah, so that was fun to take over a new business venture, something we hadn't done before, and to do it in the busiest period of the year.
Yeah.
So that was pretty crazy. So literally just no time for much else other than that. But we are getting out of that Christmas period now. Everyone's having a bit of a sigh of relief. Everyone's kind of moving on, so it's a bit more relaxed now. Time for some podcasts.
Yeah, that's it. And how's it going down at Night Parrot?
Really good. Like, Wollongong's got a real kind of split to the town right now, where all the bars seem to be down that side of town, and that part is kind of bustling at night. Whereas up by Cavoba, where sort of all the restaurants seem to be, it's a little bit quieter. So it's a great spot. Great little bar. It's been fun to do a drinks list like that as well, something I haven't done before, and to see the kind of differences. But it's been really good, really well received, and people are eating, people are drinking, people are there. It's been busy, so that's cool.
Food till 2 a.m.
Yeah, which is something that Wollongong doesn't really have, but you see a kind of multitude of places doing. In Sydney and Melbourne, like, I was at Big Popper's a couple of months ago and had like a cheese platter at 1 a.m.
Amazing.
And I was like, this is fucking great, with a nice glass of wine. So, We just do dumplings. We do a whole menu till 10, and after 10, just do like a bar menu. So lots of tasty dumplings, which is pretty quick, easy, cheap, like to push out till 2 a.m. But there's somewhere that other than kebab shop, Macca's, Domino's, to get some food after you finish your shift. So for me, it's kind of opened a bar that I want to go to after work. That's almost selfish, if anything.
Yeah, and a banging wine list as well. You get to play around with some funky new wines. I did some photography for you guys the other day. Probably like 40 different bottles or something like that I shot on the day.
50 odd wines on the list.
Yeah.
There's about close to 30 by the glass, a big by the glass list. So there's plenty for people to try. It changes pretty regularly. And it's very different, which you're learning quite fast when you're a restaurant and a bar, and what people will spend and what people will buy. So it's interesting to see that difference. Like when people are going for a restaurant, they're already committed, already spending X amount of money on the food. So probably less inclined then to spend so much more on booze in the same spot. Probably after they leave like a restaurant, they'll go out and spend booze anyway. But spending it in one kind of spot, I think, puts people off sometimes. But if people are just coming out to drink, especially after a couple, then it's like, let's get the $120 bottle of wine.
Really? So you're selling more expensive bottles and stuff?
Yeah. And by the glass is heaps more as well. So it's interesting to see that difference and see where people see their kind of value on their night out.
Yeah.
It's always been like that, where people will like easily spend like $120 on fucking VB all night. Yeah. But then be like taken aback when you go to a restaurant and it's $120 for, a degustation menu.
I guess it sort of opens your market up to people who don't actually care about going out for nice meals. Yeah. There's people who just don't actually go. They're not very interested in food.
Some people just don't see the value.
Yeah, they're not interested in going out for really special fancy dinners and things like that. They don't see the value in it, so they prefer to go spend their money on the piss.
Well, yeah. Also, I think there's always been a bit of spending a lot of money at a restaurant, or even going to a nice restaurant. Has always seen like the amount of people who've even said about Caveau, which has still got a little bit of a fancy reputation, even though it's run by two quite unfancy people.
Yes.
But people literally go like, "Oh no, it's too fancy for me." Like they would be out of place there, even though when fine dining has become something quite different now. Yeah. Especially in Australia, the service has always been a bit more relaxed. It's less kind of white gloves, white tablecloths kind of vibe. But yeah, people have this weird thing of I wouldn't go there. So they'll go out for all that mid-tier cheapie and then go and spend money on booze after, and probably spend the same amount they would have at a nicer restaurant or more upper class or higher standard, or whatever you want to describe it as.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, cool. Well, that's really exciting. I guess we'll continue to check in with how things are going at Night Harrod and at Caveau and stuff like that for you guys. But you got to put together your team. And it's fun. I've been there numerous times now just for a drink on my numerous crawls around different bars. But yeah, that area of Crown Street's really popping at the moment, so people are loving it. And yeah, you mentioned it in brief earlier, but congrats to Andy and Jen for opening Ardette's Bistro down at the Links Shell Cove, the golf course down at Shell Cove. It's a big place, and they're planning a huge renovation and stuff like that. And those guys have taken over the lease on the bistro there, with our friend of the show, Jimmy Butcher, as head chef. Jimmy was on a previous episode of The Gong Show talking about tradition and progression, and I went down there and shot some photos for them as well. And it's an amazing bistro menu. It's like fantastic. Yeah, it's like, really, really nice.
I want something like that in Wollongong.
And it's interesting because it's interesting to see chefs and restaurant owners like Andy and Jen go down into a place like that and to see what they can do with what essentially is bistro food. But just when someone who really cares about it and who cares about produce and who cares about execution and who knows how to twist things into a way to just modernize them and make them slightly more interesting.
Just food like that just takes a bit of care, really.
Care,
It really is just care. Like if you just don't give a shit about it, so you just you're buying in cheap shit and you chuck it in the fryer and you're serving it with some chips, it's going to be pretty average. But if you're taking your time and you're trying to stay away from putting chips to everything for one, it's probably like the first move. Be like, you can't just have chips with everything. And yeah, take a bit of care of your produce. Food like that is amazing, and it just takes a little bit of thought and care to make it something quite special.
Yeah, it's awesome. Congrats to them. You know, it's a big undertaking. It's a huge venue, and they're planning a big renovation and things like that. And it's a big menu. And I actually took home the majority of what we shot. If you go to my Instagram, you can see the shot that I did of the spread of all the dishes on the menu, and I took a bunch home because it was all going to go to waste. And I was sort of frantically texting my friends at 5 p.m. saying, "Cancel your dinner plans and come to my place." So thank you to Ardets. You guys fed a lot of people that night. Thanks, Jimmy. I guess as for me, and we might get into this further in a podcast because I haven't really talked too much about publishing books. We haven't really gone too far into it and what it's sort of been like. Not too much detail about it, but I took 2019 off in terms of publishing any new regional cookbooks. Mostly because I kind of wanted to regain some balance in my life, which I didn't have. I think I'd published five cookbooks from 2015 onwards, and having a deadline to make a new book every year, as well as selling all of your stock of previous books and continuing to market those and keep them relevant, was a real challenge. And then it sort of, in 2018, when I did the last one, it just sort of got a bit too much. I worked 7 days a week for most of that year, and long hours, and sort of, that was one of the reasons why I stopped working in hospitality, was because I wanted to have weekends and I wanted to have some balance. So
I know what I'll do cookbooks.
Well, that's it. And then, so last year I kind of got a bit of that balance back by doing a lot of freelance stuff. So I started doing a bit of writing for Cold Coast magazine, a lot more photography, and also I've been doing some sort of PR and digital consulting work for a construction company, which has sort of allowed me to regain some of my balance, as well as selling all the books that I currently have. I've still got 5 books there. So
it would be interesting to talk about leaving hospitality but staying connected to it, which you seem to do. Yeah. Like you can't quite get away from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're not in like the front line, but you're still like all these things that hospitality needs. You kind of provide it, so that would be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, we can talk about it. It's something that I really am grateful for, is to actually be able to have a continued connection to it, and to be able to, sit here and talk to you, and to know the people in the industry in these areas that I go to, and to be able to,
it's worth it for the free shots.
Oh, exactly.
That's probably the main benefit.
That's it.
People, like if people like, should I get in hospitality? I'm like, if you like make friends with bartenders, they'll give you free shots.
Well, that's it, free shots, and so I get a lot of free food when I do photo shoots now as well. I've been doing a lot more photo shoots,
how you feed
which has been
yourself?
Cool. If I was able to freeze food, like freeze sort of this food, then I might be able to live off it for quite a while, but usually it has to go. But yeah, doing a lot more food photography as well. So shameless plug, get onto me. info@quicksandfood.com, and I'll shoot your menu for you. You can follow me on Quicksand Food and have a look at some of my recent work. I did a fun shoot down at Howling Wolf the other day. The star of the show was, of course, the Pineapple Cruiser, which they're shamelessly plugging as some sort of weird marketing campaign that seems to be doing very, very well.
Yeah, not sure where that came from, but this is Luke Simon's growing baby of Pineapple Cruisers.
Pineapple Cruisers owes Luke a debt of gratitude.
He's going to be chuffed. They're going to mention.
Yeah.
Apparently, some Ben from Good Times Only is in Tassie, and I saw earlier a screenshot that some bartender there, like a national champion kind of bartender, the first thing he said was like, "What's to go with all the Pineapple Cruisers?"
Yeah, exactly. Great.
So next episode 2, Luke Simon's talking about Pineapple Cruisers.
Pineapple Cruisers, how to make a viral campaign about shit drinks. I guess the other thing that I've been doing that I didn't mention, I just wanted to shout out to Georgia, who was the Hidden Harvest chef, who I worked with on a really cool event last year. I didn't get the chance to talk about it on the podcast, but we did a seafood event at the Throsby last year. This was after our last podcast, and Georgia Lahif, she's a legend. She worked at Fred's up in Sydney. She was the chef for Hidden Harvest, and we sort of collaborated and put together a dinner called Seafood at the Throsby, where we raised some money for Hidden Harvest. It was kind of one of the more fancier Hidden Harvest style dinners. It was a 5-course menu, and all of our food, all of the food that night was made from seafood that would normally be thrown away. So Grant from Harley and John's gave us a bunch of seafood that he put aside for us over that week. We had things like beautiful barramundi collars, heaps of flathead roe, which we turned into a taramasalata. What else did he give us? He gave us some crab stock. We had prawn heads. We did some foraging and things like that as well. He gave us some salmon frames, which we made a stock out of, and also scraped the meat off and made into this little sort of ceviche dish that we put on top of a bread that was fried in barramundi fat. So it was kind of just exploring the issue of waste in the seafood industry and using some things that people weren't very familiar with and aware of. And it was just really nice to put on a cool, a bit more of a finer dining style event at the Throsby. And then those guys matched each of those courses with some sustainable wines that are made sustainably. So it was a bit of an info session, a bit of a dinner, and it went really well. And I just wanted to shout out to Grant from Harley and John's and to the guys at the Throsby and to Georgia for helping that all come together. That was awesome, and we'll definitely look at doing some more of those types of events this year. But yeah,
you used our leftover plates as well from Caveau, so that's just another aspect.
Yeah,
another string to your bow.
We used, and we
foraged some glassware.
We got some glassware as well. Yeah, we got some glassware. We did some foraging for that as well, which was fun. Events like that are heaps of fun to put on. So we'll definitely look at doing that sort of thing again. I know that a lot of the guests got a lot out of it. I had people sending me, photos of barramundi collars coming out of their oven and things like that, because they wanted to go there.
Massive waste item.
Yeah,
it just doesn't, like, if you're buying fillets of fish, it just doesn't come with it. So and most of the time they just get thrown away. Yep. And there's some delicious meat in there.
Oh, it was unbelievable. The quality of the meat. I mean, and it's a fatty part of the fish as well. Yeah. Like it was so rich and flavoursome.
We had a barramundi a little broth on as a snack. So I'd smoke the frames with the collars on, but the collars would never actually make it into the pan.
Yeah, right.
With the stock, because everyone would just be like picking away and be like, it gives you a little bit of meat.
Yeah, so delicious. Anyway, so that was a cool event. All right, let's forge ahead. That's what we've been up to, and it'd be cool to go a bit deeper into some of this sort of stuff. But I guess one of the first things I wanted to just recognise and talk a little bit about very briefly. We'll talk about it further in future episodes. Obviously, coming off the end of this summer, we're sitting here on February 11th. 2020 after a huge weekend of rain, but the summer was absolute fucking hell down the coast essentially for mayhem. 74 days. I think the Currowan fire burnt. We've also had numerous other fires, the Greenwater Creek fire, all fires down south, East Gippsland. The whole south coast was basically completely ravaged by fire over summer, obviously. Mass evacuations, and I guess in the context of this podcast, we just want to send out our best wishes to not only all the people that lost things on the coast, who lost their houses and lost their properties and things like that, but also to the businesses whose literally the two busiest weeks of the year were completely shut down. So for the two busiest weeks of the year are the first 2 weeks of January on the south coast, and everyone was told to evacuate the south coast. So there was no business, and as we've explored in this podcast, hospitality is a very tough gig, and the margins can be slim. And when you depend on your busy years,
those 2 busy weeks can really kind of make up for like 2 bad months in the middle of the year.
And that's exactly what they do.
And more so for probably on the south coast, where they get inundated in the summer and can be very quiet in the winter. So it like really is like, that's key.
Exactly.
With the business model of like, we need to pump during summer to go.
Exactly. So, obviously we're up here in Wollongong. I've got a house down in Browley, down near Bateman's Bay. Obviously not a business and stuff, but we were affected, having all sorts of, booking cancellations. Everyone was affected. I mean, every single person in the state essentially has been affected by these fires, but in that area, no matter who you are, whether it's, whether you just own a house and it wasn't lost, to losing everything, to losing your business, to, in the worst cases, losing loved ones, everyone was affected. So our thoughts go out to everyone that was a part of this absolutely massive crisis that happened over the summer. And what we're planning on doing is getting in contact with some of the business owners down the coast who I've got a connection to through the South Coast Cookbook, and having a chat with them about their experience. Hopefully it's maybe not too soon for people to talk about these things, but I think that when it comes to making people aware of how much it actually impacts business, they're the best place to talk about it. We can put our 2 cents in here, but we'd really like to hear it from them. So we're gonna get into contact with some people down there and have a chat. Mm-hmm. Thoughts out to them, and what a crazy time.
Yeah.
Don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I kept saying, not being from Australia, is I've never seen anything like this, and the response I was getting from almost everyone else was, nor have we. And that's kind of, and something where, fires do happen in this country. You do have slightly more crazy weather events in the UK where it just drizzles. The fact that like everyone was shocked about how severe and how bad this was, I think says a lot. Yeah,
and I mean, especially down the south coast over the years, I've witnessed many fires down there over the years. You know what I mean? I remember once back when I was probably 10 years old or something like that, coming to my house, and it was full of people that I didn't know, and I didn't even realize what was going on. But it was because there was a fire nearby, and those people evacuated from that end of town to our place. And it is a common occurrence down there, but the way that it moved this summer is completely unprecedented. No one saw anything like it. We weren't ready for it, and I think that we're not great people to talk about the whole issue. We can just talk about our experiences, and then we can talk to people who have had experiences.
Focus on the hospitality aspect of it.
Exactly. So we plan to do that down the track. Simon, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get into our first topic for the Food Fight podcast?
No, I don't think so. I think we can just get straight into rehashing old episodes,
digging up old bones again. So, our first episode ever of the Gong Show was about wage theft, and I think our last episode we touched on wage theft as well.
It keeps coming babe, and it is an ongoing issue, and more things keep coming.
Yeah, and that's why we keep on visiting it, because there is actually new things to talk about every time.
Yeah, and to be fair, we got onto it shortly after the Wollongong University student bought it, and it was in general Fairfax media. So we got on it fairly quickly, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely. The SMH sort of got a few ideas from our podcast, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's very much. It started at kind of low level, general underpayment across the board, and now it's kind of spiraled into complete front page national news with very high profile people being picked up, which maybe says a lot about the way the media works as much as anything.
Yeah, so I mean, and one of the reasons why we wanted to start talking about it this week is that it's the 11th of February, and there's been 2 major wage theft, revelations or stories this week. The first one was that Dinner by Heston down in Melbourne is going to be closing this Friday, which is the 14th of February. It's going to be closing on Friday.
Are they open on Friday or?
Don't know. Maybe Friday's the last
14th
service.
of February is one of the busiest days on the restaurant calendar. So it'd be interesting if they were if that was the last day they're trading, and whether that was any thought into it.
Who knows? So they are closing, and then just a big article on the front cover of the Australian today about the MADE Group, George Calombaris' company, of which he's a 20% shareholder, but established, going into voluntary administration with 22 establishments being set to close after owing nearly $8 million to staff in wages and benefits. So, sorry,
that's
a bit of a hiccup.
Water
Excuse
again.
me. So where do we start, Simon? Go for it.
I think the Heston one to start with is interesting because it's a bit shrouded in mystery, where Tipsy Cake, which is the holding company, which is based in the Canary Islands for tax purposes, has very little connection with Heston on paper. So it's a very interesting one. And when a restaurant's in a casino, there's always some inner workings which are a little bit unusual at times, with things like low rents or the hotel paying for them to be there or whatever it is. So it just seems like they had some massive overheads, and I imagine they would have just needed to be very busy at all times. So when they first opened, Tom worked there for a couple of weeks.
Really?
And yeah, on the tipsy cake section actually, which he was on for the whole duration.
Was that a stage or just the?
No, he actually got a job there, and then thought it was rubbish and left.
Oh.
Because the guy who he was on the section with had been on that same section for about a year.
Yeah, right.
Just doing the tipsy cake.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is what it's like in big restaurants like that a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like you literally do one job over and over again.
Wow.
But he said like they used to do sort of 200 for lunch and 200 for dinner. So when this all came out, obviously we were chatting about it and thought it was quite surprising as how do you go into receivership when you're doing numbers like that. But that was 4 or 5 years ago now. So whether the numbers have just dropped off and whether the wage scandal hit them hard as well, people, with the sort of PR crisis that created.
Yep.
But it seems all very strange, all very a little bit underhanded with Heston's companies, it seems. Same in the UK when there's been some issues there with stuff.
It's a tough one. So I've got a quote here. A representative from Tipsy Cake said, as a foreign company, Tipsy relied from the outset on the advice given by advisors in Australia and our partner Crown Melbourne, who were responsible for advising us on the staff remuneration blueprint for the restaurant. Now, I don't... That to me is looking a little bit like blame shifting.
That's massive blame
I think that really what it comes down to is whoever does the payroll, whoever sends out the wages is responsible for getting that right.
Even with that quote, it says they were advising. So that just seems like a strange way of doing it, especially when there hasn't been a scandal about other Crown employees being paid wrong. So that's saying that like if it was the Crown's fault, surely it'd be the whole company wide.
That's it. I mean, and we've got
not just one restaurant.
And at Crown, there's a bunch of different restaurants in Crown.
To be honest, it's the exact same thing. This happened every time. That like really is the point of it here. Is like everyone's trying to come up with excuses. Like it's too complicated. It's this, that, the other. Oh, they were supposed to do it. They were supposed to do it. I had no idea. Oh, I was fucking too busy on TV. This was the go 5 years ago in restaurants. People were on a salaried contract for 40, 50 hours, but every chef just did the hours needed to get through, and that generally meant 60, 70, 80. 90-hour weeks, and then that's literally was the go. That was just completely widespread across the majority of restaurants, not all. Some people were still doing it to the book, and people got caught out in the end when like it was never right, it was never legal. Everyone just knew that was what you did. That was just literally the go. So all these people who were like, "Oh, we weren't trying to do it," realistically, it's like that was what everyone was doing, and some of these big companies. When numbers are, staff 8 million, that's quite glaring. So that whatever they want to come out and say, that's basically what happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's like 100% of the time. Like, there was no need to look into these things because that's just what everyone did.
And I just wanted to give the perspective also of one of the employees that was quoted in an article, an SMH article. One worker employed at the restaurant for just over 2 years claimed the restaurant management knowingly underpaid her $25,000. And her quote says, "Whenever we would bring up the subject to the head chef, she would always say, 'Yeah, but the wage is so high, it all equals out,'" she told the New Daily. Then they talked, and then this is another quote.
Just with that point, I think that again goes down to people having a misunderstanding of how a salary works. And paying 20% over and then it working out. Like generally the thought process was, well, you're on a salary, so we're paying you the 25% above award, therefore you do as many hours as we want.
Yeah.
And that was generally the thinking of most people when that was quite clearly wrong.
Yeah. And so she goes on to say, They talked it up as a privilege to work there, and that's why we should accept the circumstances. There's a huge culture of fear. I was insulted quite often and treated like shit. I was one of the hardest workers. I'm devoted to my job. I put everything in, but getting told you're an awful human being is not what you want to hear. They're on a mission to give people the perfect food, but at the price of people's health and well-being. Now, that's a disgruntled worker, obviously, who's been underpaid $25,000. But, like, I think one of the interesting things that we can talk about with any of these cases is that these companies that have into the hundreds of employees, there's going to be a spectrum of experiences when it comes to these employees. Everything from a guy that was talking about sleeping on the floor of the kitchen in Rockpool, or, the other sort of whistleblowing staff members who've gone out to, industry unions and things like that, like Hospo Voice, and given their stories about mistreatment and stuff like that, and to the many previous employees of the Rockpool Group who came out in support of Neil Perry following, all the stuff around Rockpool Group in the campaign that they had, that was sort of a counterpoint to the what was it, the Dirty Rockpool. What was it called? Rotten Rockpool hashtag and sort of scandal things. So, of course, like there's a spectrum of experiences there, but I think that one thing to recognize is that despite the fact that there's a spectrum of experiences, if there's people out there who feel like they've been really mistreated and who have been underpaid, then it doesn't matter how many of them there are and whether or not the majority of people had a great experience. It doesn't discount the fact that these people's life was a living hell for a fucking while, and that, I didn't really see much from any of these people in any comment. So Heston's basically hasn't commented. Neil Perry has commented. George Calombaris has commented. But I haven't seen any of them sort of come out and just say, to all the people that felt like you were treated like shit and that you were coerced into working longer than you were contracted to, and that you weren't paid, and that you spent all this time trying to be remunerated for things like that, like, we apologize. Like, I'm sorry that was your experience. It seemed to be the response in the media, at least, or what you see on things like Instagram. It's like you're either with Neil or against him, and the response is, we didn't mean it. Like, we didn't, and one of the quotes was, we didn't rub our hands together and say, we're going to rip people off. Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel for the people who have come out of this being completely underpaid and who have lost their jobs, and who, especially things like students and foreign workers whose visas are now in jeopardy and stuff like that. Like, imagine being a foreign worker who's been here, living here for a while. You might have developed a relationship, and you're renting a house, and you've got some assets and things like that. And all of a sudden, you're not getting paid properly, even though you've been putting in the work, and you lose your job. Yeah, well, there you go. And you lose your job.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
That's lucky.
You dig your own grave, mate. But I don't know. I feel like in terms of the human empathy, a little bit, like a bit more from the people out front might have been a bit nice, just in terms of like apologizing and recognizing that some people actually didn't have. It wasn't black and white for a lot of people.
Neil Perry, it's trying to separate. Like, I've never met Neil Perry. He sounds like a nice dude. Everyone has lots of wonderful things to say for him, and he's done a lot for food in Australia. You can be a lovely person and have all these benefits, but you can still steal wages, accent or not. Like, and we can separate those two out. Like, it's not that Neil Perry's a bad person, and people should, because all the things people jumped to his defense, and no one really addressed what actually happened. It was just, Neil's a real good guy. This is my experience of working for him, and a lot of them were positive. But that doesn't change anything, really. You can be fairly black and white that taking people's wages is wrong. I think maybe then the backlash when it's been paid back, and he's admitted that there was mistakes made. Also made some comments on the way wages work in Australia. But at the end of the day, he did something wrong. he can still be a nice person and a great chef, and people can still have positive experiences. That they don't really. He doesn't have to be a monster.
Yeah.
Across the board, and people kind of felt that. I mean, again, that might be down to the way the media's portrayed it, and they have put high profile faces on a lot of this wage theft that's happening. But so that might be disproportionate, but definitely it hasn't really. Some people haven't just come out and said, he did wrong and he's a nice guy. Like, you can do both those things.
Yeah, and it's tough, eh? And like, I guess we can single out a couple of responses, but for example, and I went to Vudemond last year and I absolutely fucking loved it. It was probably one of the best meals that I've ever had. Like, it was such an amazing experience, and Hugh Allen is such an amazing young chef. Like, unbelievable how good that experience was. And I'm sure he's a wonderful guy, and I definitely don't want to have too much of a stab at him, but his response on social media was, all this rotten rockpool stuff's bullshit. Neil Perry's a really nice guy and I had a great experience.
Exactly.
Which is making something so black and white that is so clearly far from black and white. As we talked about just before, the experience of the different employees of such a big organization is so varied. Exactly. And just because you had a good experience and as we said, I'm sure Neil Perry's a good guy, it doesn't mean that it wasn't fucking hell for some people.
Exactly, yeah. There's a range of experiences there. And
the other thing is that it doesn't really matter sometimes about how your experience was either. It's about whether or not the law was broken.
Exactly.
So if we're looking at like, and I don't want to single out Hugh Allen too much, because there's other people who jump to. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who jump to Neil Perry's defense.
For
exactly.
So.
Yeah, like tons and tons and tons. But if the law has been broken and people are owed money because of negligence, which is what it is, I believe Neil Perry when he says we didn't rub our hands together and look at ways to rip people off.
On the flip side is that, like, people who've underpaid their staff, they've had a distinct advantage over people who were paying their staff properly. Yeah. To the point where they could expand. When you've got people working 8 hours a week for 40 hours pay, it's a lot easier to run a business like that. So there's a distinct advantage that these people have had, and they've done very, very well off it. They're multiple restaurants, they own houses, they own all these properties, all these things. So it's not like they haven't benefited from it, even if they weren't underhandedly thinking, another $4 I just got off that guy for that the hour he was underpaid. So they've done very well. They have done very well. End.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I think at the end of the day, if we can't come down to the fact that whether or not the law was broken as a factor in how we judge, someone's practices and whether or not it was right or wrong, then we sort of lose our ability to have any form of moral or practical compass around these sorts of things. If it's just about the fact that Neil Perry did a lot for a lot of charitable organisations and fostered food culture in Australia and was such an icon, and he is all these things. He's an icon of food in Australia. He's one of our most successful chefs, and he brought food, particularly Asian food and things like that, into fine dining in a way that hadn't been really seen before, and has written some extremely influential cookbooks and has brought up some extremely influential chefs and taught so much to so many, and has contributed probably more to the industry than anyone else. But at the same time, if we say that because of all these things,
the fact he broke the law doesn't take any things away. I think the thing is we need just straight up be, they did something wrong, and let's look at maybe how the media are portraying them then, which I think if you see the difference between, even some of the backlash between George Calombaris and Neil Perry, I think you see maybe two distinct figures of who's got the most friends in hospitality, because I haven't seen a defend George hashtag and people high profile chefs coming out and defending him so much. So, and I think overall everyone sort of jumped on the bloody George Calombaris, what a scumbag, where everyone went, oh no, not poor Neil Perry. Like it's all kind of well and good until your hero does something bad. So,
that's an interesting one for sure. It's like, yeah, where influence is. I think potentially the George's position as a judge on MasterChef and as a sort of a popular culture figure,
and maybe that sort of slightly bad guy on the show as well
hasn't helped him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, it's celebrity culture, isn't it? It's kind of live and die by the sword.
Yeah,
like when if a restaurant empire is, I guess also like Neil Perry has some of the best restaurants in Australia. Taking nothing away from any of George Calombaris restaurants, but they're not as highly regarded as Neil Perry's. So was his empire more held up on his celebrity than the quality and what he's done compared to Neil Perry?
Yeah, exactly. So much to talk. All right, we'll get on to George Calombaris in a second. There's something else that I wanted to mention about the Neil Perry situation. Let's talk for 1 second, because there's been numerous articles, and there's also and there's you just see so much of it on social media and things like that. But one thing that I want to talk about is the issue of compliance, and I want to talk to you about it, because we've talked about it in the past, but there was a huge piece done in the Sydney Morning Herald, and a really well written piece in the Sydney Morning Herald, Good Food, in I think November or October last year, following the Neil Perry scandal. That was written in, I've got it in front of me, just 1 second, 26th of November. It's by Danny Valent, so Restaurant Wages and the Wash Up in Good Food last year. And they go into...
excellent article there.
Yeah, a really good article, and a really, really well thought out article, and one
pragmatic and not too emotional, I thought as well.
Exactly. And it hits the nail on the head in so many places, and really fleshes out what actually is one of the biggest issues in the industry, which is customers' willingness to pay what things are worth, and restaurants' inability to raise prices with the increasing prices of every other facet of running a business. Great article, and it does touch on compliance as well. And there's two different sides to the equation when it comes to complying with the award. Now, how do you see it? Because it tends to be an excuse that gets trolleyed out, that it's like the award system is so complicated that it's impossible to be in full compliance. Now, when we're talking about numbers like $4.5 million owed by Tipsy Cake, Heston, that's one restaurant. That's Dinner by Heston, $4.5 million. And then
highly staffed restaurant.
Highly staffed restaurant.
There would have been 100 odd staff there.
Yeah, but then you've got, $8 million owing by MADE Establishments. So George Calombaris' group, that's 22 restaurants as compared to one.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see the inner workings and see who owes more per staff member. Yeah. Because 8 million obviously is going to grab the headlines over 4.5 because it's a bigger number. Yeah. But if you're looking at how many years in operation, how many staff, be interesting to see who's the biggest culprit. Kind of a ranking system. Well,
I guess the other thing, I mean, but when you've got it as one restaurant, like Dinner by Heston as compared to 22, I don't know. I guess I'd be making assumptions if I knew whether or not payroll was done by the same organisation for all the 22 different restaurants.
A lot of it's been talking about how the award wage in Australia is overcomplicated, and it is quite complicated. There's a lot of things like if you work past this time, it's on more. If it's between this time, it's this. If you don't get a break, there's extras. There is quite a lot to do to it. But if it was that complicated, like so complicated that these big $1 million companies just can't get their head around it, then everyone would be doing it wrong. Like absolutely everyone. So the fact that some people are getting it right shows that it's not that hard. So either there's some people who are real fucking smart and some people are really stupid. Or there's some people who are maybe making some excuses here, and also it's just due diligence to get that right. And if you can't understand it as part of your group, you outsource that. Yeah, like you would do with anything. Like we got you to take photos because we can't use a camera. Yeah. Here.
Well, you would have thought that Rockpool Group would have been able to outsource its bookkeeping to the equity firm that it's owned by, who I'd assume has a pretty good understanding of finance.
Well, also this again might be the media because there's underpayment in lots of different industries, lots of different sectors, and these companies that own these hospitality groups also own other companies. and so far nothing's come about their underpayment. So is that just because it hasn't come out, or is that because they managed to get it right with other jobs where the award would be, I guess, equally complicated? Not that I've ever looked into the award wages for a lawyer or something, or for corporate sector
or whatever it might be. Yeah.
So again, it all just screams like people doing kind of damage minimization.
Yeah, and well, I think, and one thing, I don't know, it depends how brazen I want to be in my in the language that I use here, but I've got experience in having professional financial relationships with so many businesses, from restaurants to retailers to providing, photography as a service, from doing cookbooks to selling cookbooks and things like that. And I'm invoicing these different organizations all the time, and also trying to, and when it comes to restaurants, like, it's so fucking hard to get 5 minutes of your time if you don't know me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and you guys are busy as shit, and it's just like, I think that it's not necessarily negligence, but small business ownership is such a fucking hard and busy and stressful thing to do that it's very easy to not pay, attention enough to things like the award and let that sort of stuff slip by.
I would have a lot more sympathy, because just the amount of, and a lot of business owners do this because they have to, or they decide to, is they do all their own bookkeeping. Like, we've got no fucking interest in doing that here. Straight from the start, we were like, nah, I'm not spending like a whole day going through invoices, making sure those invoices are paid, working out what we have. Like, there's no way we ever want to do that. So we get someone to do it for us, who now does both of our businesses. And she is on top of what award wages need to be paid. And if there's ever been a discrepancy, or like, I didn't pay that person, it went up, the award goes up every year, we missed a week or something, it gets, just gets sorted out. And we're confident that it happens. And obviously Tom and I have educated ourselves about it and looked into it, so we have a general understanding of how it works. But I would have a lot more sympathy from a small business owner who's missed something for a year with some staff. Like, I can understand that, because there's just so many fucking invoices between booze, food, your staff wages, like paying your fucking taxes and your BAS and all these things. That there is a lot, which is then why, if it was really that hard, every single small business owner would be fucking it up, because they don't have a whole army of people behind them who specifically do these things. Like, it wasn't Neil Perry going and paying the wages on zero.
Oh, you sure?
Like maybe
logging in on his phone and doing payroll while he's on the train.
Flying Qantas.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, it's a lovely entree in Qantas first class. I'll just finish off the payroll.
Got some back invoices to pay.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, there you go. Like, I mean, that's a really good point. And it's just your responsibility. But like, do you think that it's almost like, and I've had this thought that anyone can just open a business? Like, if you've got the money, it's hard to get a loan, but if you've got the money, you can just open you can be anyone. You can be just out of jail.
If you own a house, then it's really
easy. If you own a house,
it's really easy to get a business
loan.
There
you go. Yeah, you can get a business loan. And so anyone can open a business, and you do not actually need to prove any experience in business ownership or administration.
And to be fair, hospitality is one of the only industries where people with absolutely no experience, like never worked in a bar or a restaurant or a cafe, decide to open a bar, restaurant or cafe. It's actually baffling why people do it
as their first business.
Yeah, and they'll be like, I like going to bars. It's like, fuck, you won't for a while. Like, once you own one, you'll fucking be sick of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is definitely one thing. Like, you wouldn't, like, I mean, can you name another sector where you could just, you can't just start a dentistry firm? And be like, I love going to
without business experience.
Yeah,
like there's business.
Love brushing my teeth.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you could probably figure out how to open a retail shop, like a little bookshop or something that with less experience than hospitality. But it is interesting that hospitality is the one where the more inexperienced people go in there starting. But like, I think that potentially when it comes to opening hospitality businesses and other businesses and things like that, is there not some sort of way that we can ensure that people are understanding the gravity of their responsibility and in the decision that they're making?
There probably does need to be more government help, and I mean, obviously, like it's
obviously government.
Mistakes can get made quite often, and it's kind of how we solve problems at the restaurant is. You look back at everything and go, right, what could be done better? What can be put in? What education can be put in place? What systems can be put in place so that doesn't happen again? So obviously this is happening, and then we can obviously have discussed the reasons why. But there needs to be better things in place to make sure it never happened or it doesn't happen again. So I guess maybe some simplifying of the award wages, or some help. Whether it's they put together a package that they send to a hospitality business that helps explain it in poppy green colours, like they always like to do with government, things like that, or whatever it is. There probably does need to be something better in place to help explain that. Because like I said, that people do just open. I mean, and I had no business experience. Yeah, like I'd worked in restaurants for a while and I'd always taken an interest in the inner workings, but we had to learn pretty fucking quickly what we were doing, and like I said, anything we didn't know, we outsourced straight away. Yep. And asked for help and got help, which we were able to access through sort of various means. Maybe not available to everyone.
Well, like I think the other thing that I think we should talk about in a future episode of the podcast, and actually have a guest to talk about it, or have a few guests, or do some of those phone-in interviews that we've done in the past, is when businesses close. Now, the hospitality industry has one of the highest, percentages of business closure during its first year than any other industry.
It's like over 50%.
It's extremely
in the
high.
First 2 years.
And when something like this happens, and let alone Rockwool Group or Tipsy Cake or Made Company, Made Group. The people that cop it the most are the suppliers. So you've got any institutions like the banks and stuff being first on the list to be repaid, and then you've got the employees, and at the very, very bottom of the list, and I've been, I'm owed invoices by businesses which have closed, and I never got that money, are the suppliers. And a lot of these suppliers are small businesses as well. They might be farmers, like, farmers like some of the ones like Phil Lavers from Moonacres Farm that we've interviewed, who have a long list of people that owe him money because they were on credit, and they, close their business and they don't have any money, and they say, thanks for coming.
Yeah, and even if you've signed a credit app and you've provided guarantees and you put guarantors down, if your business goes into receivership and you basically declare bankruptcy, the person who's owed money has to fight for that money. It's not just like, then they just get paid out because they have this bit of paper. They've got to put that forward and spend money to maybe get a percentage of that money back. And a lot of time it's just not worth it for a small supplier. It's like fucking my ex-partner's father had a fruit and veg supply company up in Barrel. Still does, actually. And I was talking to him about it before, and he's like, yeah, they owe me this much, but there's no point. I'm not going to be able to get it back. I might get a portion of it back. I just have to forget about it. Yep. And it can be, it can be $5,000, it can be $10,000, it can be it can be 15, 20. Like it can be a sizable amount of money. And to have to pay, someone to try and get some of that money back just seems like a waste of time. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And, I've gone through that, and I'm still going through it right now. There's so many people out there that owe money to their suppliers, and it's just like, I don't know. It's and I think that comes into the, educating prospective business owners about the gravity of their decisions. It's like when you get into business and you're going to have suppliers and things like that. Like just keep in mind that if your business goes under, you're fucking up people's finances and potentially putting some serious stress on their businesses. Like a lot of these businesses don't run on huge margins. Yeah. So it's not just you that your business failing is going to have an effect on. Yeah. And I don't know.
There hasn't been a lot in when Jamie Oliver's he closed a majority of certain certain sectors of his restaurants, he has far too many, I think, was
Yeah.
maybe the problem. There was talk, like Jay Rayner actually came out and wrote a whole article about how this is basically going to affect the suppliers most. There hasn't actually been the same write-up of that in Australian media.
Yeah.
Which there probably someone needs to do. Right, again, rather than...
Maybe it should be us, mate. Maybe we should... I think what we'll do in one of these, upcoming episodes of The Food Fight is... Let's try to find who some of these suppliers to Calombaris' restaurants were and get them on the phone and have a chat.
Ooh, saucy.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I mean, why not?
Yeah. Well, because and they're the people who will be the last to get paid, because there's taxes to go, there's super to be paid, there's wages, all these other things which get higher priority in government legislation, and then when liquidator comes in, the supplier's pretty low down because they know they couldn't generally get away with not paying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough one. Well, it's big responsibility. So,
yeah.
And, it affects a lot of people, not just the people who own these businesses.
Exactly. I think one interesting point in the article came out today in Australia.
In the Australian, yeah.
Was a quote about someone who basically said it's a double hit from Calombaris now. First, he underpays all his staff, and then he closes and everyone loses their jobs. And it's like, you can't really have it both ways. If you're going to basically boycott his restaurants, not go there, slander or rip him in the media, so to the point where you want him to lose all his businesses because he doesn't deserve them, people are going to lose their jobs. Like, you literally can't have it both ways. You have to still, if you want people to pay their staff right, you still have to support their business.
Yeah.
Like, it was the same when it came out in the Mercury originally. People were like, boycott this restaurant. And it's like, well, now they're definitely not going to pay their staff right.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they actually can't afford it.
And all their staff are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, exactly. So that just seemed a completely ludicrous way of looking at it. And that's kind of the way it's been.
Yep.
Like the whole point being is that you need to support businesses, so therefore they have better margins, pay a bit more for your food, maybe go out to that restaurant you like one more time a year, so then they can pay their staff, to the mark, and then hopefully pay them better as well.
Yep. And to the credit of Rockpool Group, it looks like they've really made an effort to, to set things.
Oh, exactly.
To set things right,
because it wasn't that hard when they had to.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's not that hard when it's on the front page.
So we've re-looked into it, and now we've got it all right, and we're doing everything fine. So okay, cool.
It took a bit of reading.
Yeah. So that just says it right there, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and they're still going strong. So, Rockpool Group surviving. MADE Establishments, George Calombaris' 22 restaurants, all in voluntary administration. George is looking at selling his $7 million mansion in Toorak.
He's only got his $2 million one on a beach somewhere now. poor bloody bastard.
We love you, George. Yeah, I mean. We've done a lot of our wage theft stuff to death, but it's definitely prudent for us to do it in the biggest week of wage theft news of 2020 for sure. So let's wrap it up there, Simon. It's been an hour of the first episode of the Food Fight podcast. If you want to get in touch with me on social media, it's just Quicksand Food. We've got a new Instagram page too. It's at the Food Fight Podcast. Super easy. You can check us out there. Simon, your social media stuff?
Simon Evans Cavo with underscores.
And Cavo Restaurant and Night Parrot.
Yeah. Look at Cavo, you'll find me in the restaurant. Night Parrot, you'll find Night Parrot. Cool. Well, easy. Yeah, that makes it easy. Yeah. And then you can email us at this podcast at thefoodfightpodcast@gmail.com. If you've got any ideas for guests or any stuff that you want to talk about, anything whatsoever, you can email us there. You can also just get me on the email address I've always been using, which is info@quicksandfood.com. Get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Go onto iTunes, find us at The Food Fight, leave us a review, leave us a rating, because that actually really helps us. And I guess... Well, there's like 2 other Food Fight podcasts. We need to beat them. Yep. So we come up first. We'll smash it, mate. Please help. But yeah, we want to really make a go of this and make it something that we can continue to do. So we're going to put our time into it and stuff like that. So hopefully you guys out there support us as well, because we like doing it and we hope you like listening to it. And if I'm honest,
there's not that many really awesome food podcasts in Australia. There's a few that are really awesome, but there's no reason why we can't make one as well. So
Exactly.
that's what we want to do. Cool. Let's end it there. Thanks, Simon.
See you later.
See you later.